So this is a continuation. We had a technical disruption. And the silence seemed to dislike being broken, except by the noise of water and the wail of wind and the crack of stone. The summer is getting on down below, thought Bilbo, and haymaking is going on and picnics. They will be harvesting and blackberrying, and before we even begin to go down the other side at this rate. And the others were thinking equally gloomy thoughts. And although when they had said goodbye to Elrond and the high hope of a midsummer morning, they had spoken gaily of the passage of the mountains and of riding swift across the lands beyond. They had thought of coming to the secret door in the lonely mountain, perhaps the very next first moon of autumn. And perhaps it will be Durin's Day, they said. Only Gandalf had shaken his head and said nothing. Dwarves had not passed that way for many years, but Gandalf had, and he knew how evil and danger had grown and thriven in the wild, since the dragons had driven men from the lands, and the goblins had spread in secret after the battle in the mines of Moria. Even the good plans of a wise wizard like Gandalf and good friends like Elrond go astray sometimes when you are off on dangerous adventures over the edge of the wild, and Gandalf was a wise enough wizard to know it. He knew that something unexpected might happen, and he hardly dared to hope that they would pass without fearful adventures over those great tall mountains with lonely peaks and valleys where no kings ruled. They did not. All was well until one day when they met a thunderstorm, and more than a thunderstorm, a thunder battle.
I love this part.
You know how terrible and terrific a really big thunderstorm can be down in the land in the river valley, especially at times when two great thunderstorms meet and clash. More terrible still are thunder and lightnings in the mountains at night, when storms come up from the east and west and make war. The lightning splinters on the peaks and rocks shiver, and great clashes split the air and go rolling and tumbling into every cave and hollow, and the darkness is filled with overwhelming noise and sudden light. And here is a picture of the mountain path. And Jenny, I think we need the other weapon that we brought today for the boys to see.
We'll do that for another video.
This is another video. It's on my bed in Mommy's spot because Mommy got it. Bilbo had never seen or imagined anything of the kind. They were high up a narrow place with a dreadful fall into a dim valley at one side of them, and they were sheltering under the hanging rock for the night, and lay beneath a blanket and shook from head to toe. When he peeped out in the lightning flashes, he saw that across the valley, stone giants were out and were hurling rocks at one another for a game, and catching them and tossing them down into the darkness, where they smashed among the trees far below, or splintered into little bits with a bang. Then came a wind and rain, and the wind whipped in the rain and the hail about in every direction, so that an overhanging rock was no protection at all. Soon they were getting drenched, and their ponies were standing with their heads down and their tails between their legs, and some of them were whinnying in fright. They could hear the giants guffawing and shouting all over the mountainsides. "This won't do at all," said Thorin. "If we don't get blown off or drowned or struck by lightning, we shall be picked up by some giant and kicked sky high for a football." "Well, if you know of anywhere better, take us there," said Gandalf, who was feeling very grumpy and was far from happy about the giants himself. The end of their argument was they sent Fili and Kili to look for better shelter. They had very sharp eyes, and being the youngest of the dwarves by some 50 years, they usually got these sorts of jobs when everybody could see that it was absolutely no use sending Bilbo. There was nothing like looking if you want to find something, or so Thorin said to the young dwarves, and you certainly usually find something if you look, but not always quite the something you were after. So it proved on this occasion. Soon, Feely and Keely came crawling back, holding onto the rocks in the wind. We found a dry cave, they said, not far around the next corner, and the ponies and all could get inside. Have you thoroughly inspected it? Said the wizard, who knew that caves up in the mountains were seldom unoccupied. Yes, yes, they said, though everybody knew they could not have been at it long about it. They had come back too quick. It isn't all that big, and it does not go far back. That, of course, is the dangerous part about caves. You don't know how far back they go sometimes, or where a passage may lead to, or what is waiting for you on the inside. But now, Feely and Keely's news seemed good enough. So they all got up and prepared to move. The wind was howling and the thunder still growling, and they had a business of getting themselves and their ponies along. Still, it was not far to go, and before long they came to a big rock standing out in the path. And so, this is Granddad's custom katana that Grandma got him. And it is really interesting. And I will have to show this to you sometime when we are together and we can cut things. You'll notice the ska is green and the hilt is green to brown, or the scabbard. And so we need to continue. And a weapon like this will come in handy soon. So they all got up and prepared to move. The wind was howling and the thunder still growling, and they had a business of getting themselves and their ponies along. So it was not very far to go, and before long they came to a big rock standing out in the path. If you stepped behind, you found a low arch in the side of the mountain. There was just room to get the ponies in with a squeeze when they had been unpacked and unsaddled. And as they passed under the arch, it was good to hear the wind and the rain outside instead of all around them, and to feel safe from the giants and their rocks. But the wizard was taking no risk. He lit up his wand, as he did that day in Bilbo's dining room that seemed so long ago, if you remember, and by its light they explored the cave from end to end. It seems quite a fair size, not too large and mysterious. It had a dry floor and some comfortable nooks. At one end there was room for the ponies, and there they stood, mighty glad of the change, steaming and champing in their nose bags. Owen and Glun wanted to light a fire at the door to dry their coats, but Gandalf would not hear of it. So they spread out their wet things on the floor and got dry ones out of their bundles. Then they made their blankets comfortable and got out their pipes and blew smoke rings, which Gandalf turned into different colors and set dancing up on the roof to amuse them. They talked and forgot about the storm and discussed what each would do with his share of the treasure when they got it, which at the moment did not seem so impossible. And so they dropped off to sleep one by one. And that was the last time they had used the ponies, packages, baggages, tools, and paraphernalia they had brought with them. It turned out a good thing that night that they had brought little Bilbo with them after all, for somehow he could not go to sleep for a long while. And when he did sleep, he had very nasty dreams. He dreamed that a crack in the wall of the back of the cave got bigger and opened wider and wider. And he was very afraid, but could not call out or do anything but lie and look. Then he dreamed that the floor of the cave was giving way and he was slipping, beginning to fall down, 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 goodness knows where, too. And that he woke up with a horrible start and found that part of his dream was true. A crack had opened in the back of the cave and was already a wide passage. He was just in time to see the last of the ponies' tails disappearing into it. And of course he gave a very loud yell, as loud a yell as a hobbit can give, which is surprising for their size. Out jumped the goblins, big goblins, great ugly looking goblins, lots of goblins. Before you could say rocks and blocks, there was 6 to each dwarf at least, and 2 even for Bilbo. They were all grabbed and carried through the crack before you could say tinder and flint. But not Gandalf. Bilbo's yell had done that much good. It had wakened him up in a splintered second, and when the goblins came to grab him, there was a terrific flash like lightning in the cave, a smell like gunpowder, and several of them fell dead. The crack closed with a snap, and Bilbo and the dwarves were on the wrong side of it. Where was Gandalf? Of that, neither they nor the goblins had any idea, and the goblins did not wait to find out. They seized Bilbo and the dwarves and hurried them along. It was deep, deep dark, such as only goblins that have taken to living in the heart of the mountains can see through. The passages were crossed and tangled in all directions, but the goblins knew their way, as well as you would do to the nearest post office, and they went down and down, and it was most horribly stuffy. The goblins were very rough and pinched unmercifully, and chuckled and laughed in their horrible, strong voices. And Bilbo was more unhappy even than when the troll had picked him up by his toes. He wished again and again for his nice, bright hobbit hole, not for the last time. Now there came a glimmer of red light before them. The goblins began to sing or croak, keeping time with the flap of their feet on the stone and shaking their prisoners as well. Clap, snack, the black crack, grab, grip, pinch, nab, and down to Goblin Town you go, my lad. Clash, crash, crush, smash, hammers and tongs, knocker and thongs, pound and pound far underground, ho ho, my lad. Swish, swack, whip, crack, batter and beat, yammer and bleat, work, work, nor dare to shirk, while goblins quaff and goblins laugh, round and round, far underground, below, my lad. It sounded truly terrifying. The walls echoed to the clap and snack and the crush and smash, and the ugly laughter of their ho-ho, my lad, and the general meaning of the song was only too plain, for a swish smack sent them running as fast as they could in front of them, and more than one of the dwarves were already yammering and bleating like anything when they stumbled into a big cavern. It was lit by a great red fire in the middle, and by torches along the wall, and it was full of goblins. They all laughed and stamped and clapped their hands when the dwarves, with poor little Bilbo at the back and nearest to the whips, came running in, while the goblin drivers whooped and cracked their whips behind. The ponies were already huddled in a corner, and there were all the baggages and packages lying broken open, being rummaged by goblins, smelt by goblins, fingered by goblins, and quarreled over by goblins. I'm afraid that was the last they ever saw of those excellent little ponies, including the jolly, sturdy little white fellow that Elrond had lent to Gandalf, since his horse was not suitable for the mountain paths. For goblins eat horses, and ponies, and donkeys, and other much more dreadful things, and they are always hungry. Just now, however, the prisoners were thinking only of themselves. The goblins chained their hands behind their backs and linked them all together in a line and dragged them to the far end of the cavern, with little Bilbo tugging at the end of the row. There in shadows on a large flat stone sat a tremendous goblin with a huge head, and armed goblins were standing around him carrying the axes and bent swords that they use. Now goblins are cruel, wicked, and bad-hearted. They make no beautiful things, but they make many clever ones. They can tunnel and mine as well as any but the most skilled dwarves, and when they take the trouble, though they are usually untidy and dirty, hammers, axes, swords, daggers, pickaxes, tongs, and also instruments of torture, they make very well, or get other people to make to their design. Prisoners and slaves that have to work till they die for want of air and light. It is not unlikely that they invented some of the machines that have since troubled the world, especially the ingenious devices for killing large numbers of people at once. For wheels and engines and explosions always delighted them, and also not working with their own hands more than they could help. But in those days and in those wild parts, they had not advanced, as it is called so far. They did not hate dwarves especially, no more than they hated everybody and everything, and particularly the orderly and prosperous. In some parts, wicked dwarves had even made alliances with them, which is amazing. But they had a special grudge against Thorin's people because of the war which you have heard mentioned, which does not come into this tale, and anyway, goblins don't care who they catch as long as it's done smart and secret, and the prisoners are not able to defend themselves. "Who are these miserable persons?" said the great goblin. "Dwarves and this," said one of the drivers, pulling at Bilbo's chain so that he fell forward onto his knees. "We found them sheltering in our front porch." Soon more to come.